Grace and peace. I'm Brian Musser, the Baptist campus minister at Drexel University, and this is Peace and Power Christian Fellowship, the peace of Jesus Christ to change your life, the power of the Holy Spirit to change the world. And we are starting a brand new series with this video, and it is the Discipleship Experience. I may refer to it as DX in the future. We'll see if that catches on. But this is using the spiritual disciplines to transform all of who we are into the image of Christ. So how do we practice these spiritual disciplines to transform ourselves into Christ-like creatures? We all know probably from experience so far that this will not be a process that happens by accident. It is something that we have to engage in intentionally. And spiritual disciplines are those tools that help us in this process. This goes to say that Leo Tolstoy says it this way. Everybody thinks of changing humanity, but nobody thinks of changing himself. Spiritual disciplines are those tools that help us change ourselves, so therefore we will be in a better place to engage and help humanity become better as well through the grace and power that is available in Jesus Christ. Cervantes puts these words in the mouth of Don Quixote. It is one thing to praise discipline and another to submit to it. So it's this idea that discipline only really matters, only really works as we engage it ourselves. So just some quick questions to think about. You might want to jot those answers down in the comments below. How would you define spiritual disciplines? And what are some spiritual disciplines? Hit pause if you want to, drop those comments down below. We are going to look at, in the very next, moving on, some definitions of spiritual disciplines from books I've been reading about this subject in preparation for this series. And the first one is coming from The Making of an Ordinary Saint by Nathan Foster. His definition, the concept of spiritual disciplines is really quite simple. We do the practices that Jesus did. Over time, these practices become habitual, thus enabling us to respond to life in a way more like Jesus would if he were to live our life. And I like this book. This is a highly recommended book. It's written by Nathan Foster, who grew up as the son of Richard Foster. He's still the son of Richard Foster. But Richard Foster wrote Celebration of Discipline, which is a book we will quote quite a bit in this series. So can you imagine being the son who wrote the book, of the man who wrote the book on spiritual disciplines and how that would affect your engagement with those disciplines? And, growing up in that environment, this is actually kind of a personal memoir of what it was like to actually be an adult and engage those spiritual disciplines when your whole life has been kind of wrapped around them from your dad's job, not so much other things. So great book, but his definition is those things that help us live like Jesus and do what Jesus would have done. They make us Christ-like. Another good book on spiritual disciplines is The Spirit of Disciplines. And on page 68, Dallas Willard says this: the disciplines are activities of mind and body, purposefully undertaken to bring our personality and total being into effective cooperation with the divine order. He goes on to define it again on page 86. The disciplines for the spiritual life, rightly understood, are time-tested activities consciously undertaken by us as new men and women to allow our spirit ever-increasing sway over our embodied selves. They help by assisting the ways of God's kingdom to take the place of habits of sin embedded in our lives. So this is also another great book. And this book, more than the other ones talk more about the spiritual disciplines. This talks about the theory behind the spiritual disciplines in a way that the other books don't. And Dallas Willard, as if you've watched any of my YouTube videos before this, I am a big fan. of Dallas Willard's, and this is just right up there as one of the best books to read on the subject as well. It's this idea that the spiritual disciplines not only engage our whole selves and our embodied selves. There are things we do with our bodies that have spiritual consequences. They also help us engage embedded sinfulness in our bodily habits as well, in the ways we have been practicing sin for a while. This helps us practice these disciplines in order to eradicate sins. Another book and another definition. This is A Man's Guide to Spiritual Discipline. This is probably the simplest book. It's written real quick, real easy read, written for a men's ministry by Patrick Morley. And this is how he defines disciplines are the spiritual habits by which we cultivate a deeper relationship with the Lord of heaven and earth. Disciplines are not ends in themselves, they are means to an end. We place our trust in God, not the disciplines. So we want a deeper relationship with God. That is the end. The means through which we do that are the spiritual disciplines. They put us in a position to have a deeper relationship with God. And finally, this is probably the authority on spiritual disciplines out there, Richard Foster, Nathan Foster's father, and his definition: God has given us the disciplines of the spiritual life as a means of receiving his grace. The disciplines allow us to place ourselves before God so that he can transform us. So disciplines are just these spiritual activities we can do that puts us in a position to receive grace from God in a way that not doing them wouldn't allow us to be in that position. So these are just things we do with our physical bodies, with who we are as persons, that allow us to engage in a relationship with God in a way that is habit forming. So just real quick, drop this down in the comments, was which definition sticks out to you the most and why. And if you want a book to read on this, any of those 4 books that I listed are just good reads for whatever you're doing. If I had to recommend one over the others, it's Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline. That's like the textbook on this subject. As always, there are 3 ways to join this conversation in person Sunday nights at 7 p.m. This will be starting March 28th, and then live Monday nights 7 p.m. starting March 29th. That will be via Zoom. You'll find the link in the description below. And then you can always participate on demand with these weekly wrap-ups, which I post on YouTube and link to my WordPress blog as well. All those things are in the description below, and I'm all over social media: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, YouTube. Those links are in the description below as well. Enjoyed having this conversation with you and hope it continues real soon.